former Chief Ethics Officer, Tata Group. He's worked with the Tatas for more than 2 decades and closely with Ratan Tata. Thanks very much, Mukund, for joining me. Your memories at the very outset of Ratan Tata on this very sad day.
I think, first of all, a very fine human being, very unlike the caricatures that you would have had in the 1980s and 1990s, where a typical Indian business person. He was somebody who was extremely articulate, very well read, very exposed to international trends, and yet a thorough gentleman in India, somebody who would never throw his weight around, who would treat the peons in Bombay House just as well as he would treat senior corporate leaders, somebody who insisted on carrying his own bags at the airports, rejected any semblance of entourage around him, very down to earth human being. And at the same time, a fantastic business person. He did the things that were so necessary for the Tatas. He took over in 91, soon after liberalization, and it was very critical in that decade to prepare the Tata Group to take on competition, both domestic competition as well as the entry of international companies that are coming to the Indian market. And once he had cemented the ability of Indian companies in Tatas to really compete, he then encouraged them to go overseas in the next 10 years of his chairmanship. And that saw tremendous growth of the Tata Group from a $10 billion group that was largely Indian to a $100 billion group that had made a name all across the world by the time he retired in 2012. So I think both as a human being and as somebody who was a role model, I think, for business persons around the world, I had this fantastic privilege of having worked closely with him.
You know, you just mentioned a fantastic human being, not just an industrialist. Is that something that sort of makes him a cut above the rest? Even during 26/11, the way he treated the employees at the Taj after that horrific terror attack was truly very, very special, wasn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. He really felt for people. Even when you think about the corporate purpose statement that he crafted in the 1990s for the Tata Group, which holds true to this day, it is about improving the quality of life of the communities we serve. And that was something he felt passionately about. He felt that if you're in business, there has to be something that you do to really improve the lot of people around you. You cannot have a successful enterprise in a sea of poverty. And he was a nationalist at one level. If you think about all the big projects he undertook, whether it was designing and building the first Indian passenger car, the Tata Indica, then later on the vision to create the lowest cost vehicle in the world, the Tata Nano. These are all projects meant to bring mobility to the Indian customer. And he really felt that Tatas were in a special place with the capability to really do these things for communities right to the bottom of the pyramid in India. Similarly, his work at the Tata Charities as chairman of India's largest charities, the Tata Trusts, enormous amount of good work that these charities are able to do. There are very few non-profits, I would dare say, in this country of any note, which have not at some point or the other received grants from the Tata Trusts. And he really tried to make the companies and the trusts work seamlessly together, something that we often saw in action when you had natural disasters, and the Tata Group really pitched in to help communities that had been disrupted by floods, by earthquakes, and so on. So somebody who was passionate about the way in which business could really be a transformative power and a power for good.
Any personal memories, your interactions with him in the boardroom, outside, a piece of advice that he gave you on leadership?
Well, the very first interview, in a sense, to join his office that I had with him, I had a master's and a doctorate, but in social sciences. I did not have an MBA. And I remember telling him, Mr. Tata, are you sure that I will be able to support you well in your office? I was to start as his executive assistant and eventually became his principal staff officer. And I said, I don't have an MBA. Is that going to be a problem for you? And he said, Mukund, the only thing you need to succeed in the corporate world is good common sense. And that's something I repeat so many times to youngsters these days, that it's not all about what you're taught in classrooms. There's so much you can learn by doing. But obviously, you need a boss with empathy, somebody who's going to coach and guide you and invest in you. And that's something that Ratan Tata is always able and willing to do. He really enjoyed being with young people. And I think it's also had something to do with the fact that he was a very young person, in a sense, in the boardroom of Tata Sons when he took charge of the Tata Group. All his peers around the table were people who were 2 and 3 decades older than him. And I think that made him quite sensitive and conscious about the fact that young people need to always be supported. And later in life, of course, we all know the huge hand he's had in supporting many entrepreneurs and very young startups of this country. So a remarkable person and somebody that one was very fortunate to know.
You know, of course, you cannot take away Ratan from the Parsi in him. Was there ever any good old Parsi humor you were treated to every now and then, or some Parsi food? Of course, the great love for dogs that everyone is talking about. Something distinctive that you had experienced when you were with him?
All of that. And I think the sense of humor is the one that one really remembers him the most for. You saw a lot of that, very evident, particularly in the 1990s. Sadly, as he sort of grew older and became, as I said, the senior statesman in the boardroom, some of those jokes would sort of start vanishing from his interactions with people. But he always had the sense of humor. I think that was one critical element in keeping you sane in the kind of tension-filled job that the chairman of India's largest group is sort of prosecuting responsibilities for. One episode I can very quickly recount. Sitting at the boardroom, surrounded by some of the most eminent people in India. One of these was the person who built the NCPA infrastructure that we all cherish these days, Jamshed Baba. Baba had this habit of slipping off his shoes under the boardroom table. And Mr. Tata, spotting this at one meeting, slowly and conveniently sort of kicked those shoes sideways and then pushed them aside to the end of the boardroom table, which Baba didn't notice. At the end of the meeting, as all the directors are filing out, Mr. Baba gets up and suddenly discovers there are no shoes. And Mr. Tata, who had sort of obviously engineered this, smiling, chuckling with some of his directors. I mean, that is what the man was capable of. So somebody who could have a wicked sense of humor, but ultimately a heart of gold beneath all of it.
Wicked sense of humor at times, but a heart of gold above all else. Mukund Rajan, for sharing some of those memories of you while you were at Tata's. I appreciate you joining me too.